This incident occurred sometime in 1982, before I joined the U.S. Air Force. Around 1982, I was in college, and we were living in a rented bottom apartment in Baguio City, Philippines. We had one bathroom near the entranceway. My bed was facing the door, which faced down the hallway where the bathroom is. On occasions, I would get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and this night was one of those nights. Just as I was about to get up and go to the bathroom, I see my mom, in her nightgown, pass by my door and go down the hallway to the bathroom. I was sure it was my mom because it looked like the nightgown she wears, and she had short hair exactly like my mom's. I didn't see the face, only the back of her head. My first thought was, oh great, I gotta pee and now I gotta wait for Mom. After a few minutes, Mom had not left the bathroom, and I was getting impatient because I had to pee. Finally, I called out, Mom, could you hurry it up? I gotta go pee. No response. I called out again, and still no response. Just great. So I get up and walk down the hallway to the bathroom and saw that the bathroom door was open. I ask, Mom, are you there? Are you okay? No response. I open the door and no one is there. I'm confused because there is no way she could have left the bathroom and gone back to bed without me seeing. I'm freaked out at this point, but I still have to pee. I go back to bed and can't get back to sleep. I asked my mom in the morning if she had gone to the bathroom last night, and she said she didn't. I later find out that the owner's niece had killed herself upstairs, and they showed me her picture, and it looked exactly like the figure I had seen. But this wasn't the only incident to happen in that house. One night, I was woken up by 3 loud slaps on the side of the dresser that was next to my bed. I mean, they were loud slaps. I was confused. This was before I had the sighting. I tried to replicate how hard you had to slap the dresser to get that sound. I found out that I had to slap that dresser very hard to replicate the slaps that had happened literally a few inches from my head. The only other incident also happened while I was in college. I was taking engineering and I was working on my plate for my mechanical drawing class. It was late at night, but I was busy. For some reason, I looked up from my drawing to look at a shoe in front of me on the floor. The shoe suddenly moved by itself across the floor about 4 feet. I freaked out and ran out of my room and didn't bother finishing my project. But those were the only 3 incidences that I can remember from that house. Years later, my brothers and sisters would tell me that they would hear footsteps in the kitchen. This occurred around 1990 at Clark Air Base in the Philippines, while I was stationed there as a radio operator. I worked in Building 829 high-frequency receiver site. The building was surrounded by the antenna field, so it was clear all the way around. It was located about a mile off the main road. Not everyone had cars back then, and many people just took the base shuttle bus and walked down the road to the building. It was not uncommon to see people walking up and down the road during shift change. I picked up my friend Derek from off base since we were both living off base at the time. It was around 18-15 hours and we were halfway down the road, heading towards the receiver site. Usually, if I saw someone walking towards the building, I would give them a lift the rest of the way in. So here we were driving on that road, not full daylight, but you could still see everything, and there was no grass tall enough to hide someone. As I'm driving, I see a person walking towards the building, so I think to myself that I would give this guy a lift. I could see the person pretty well. It was a male wearing a white shirt and blue jeans. As the car gets to within 50 feet, the person simply vanishes in front of my eyes. I was too shocked to say anything, and I was not about to say anything to my friend in the passenger seat. Then Derek says, "Did you see that? Where did the guy go?" I responded, "Yeah, I did. I wasn't going to say anything though." So I stopped the car and we both got out to see where the guy went. Nothing. There was no one else but us, and no one else walking down the road. We got back in the car and drove into work. Later on, I kept saying that we saw a ghost, but Derek refused to admit it. He would only say that we saw something, but would not say it was a ghost. That was my only visual sighting at Clark, but there was another unexplainable incident that happened at that building. There is a strip of highway near my hometown where too many car accidents have happened. It isn't curvy, it isn't bumpy. It's a straight strip of highway that, for some reason or another, has seen multiple crashes. I first became aware of these accidents when I started dating my then boyfriend. The strip of highway was between both of our places, and I never drove it until we met. One night, I was headed to his place when I saw it. I'm calling it an apparition, although I have no idea what it was. It was a white transparent essence that appeared to dive in front of my car. I know it could have been a mist, but it was fast and looked like a ghost. It startled me and I swerved the car, nearly crashing into the guardrail. I corrected last minute and straightened out, feeling grateful to be okay and making note of where it happened, so I could tell my boyfriend about it. The next time I was driving with him, I showed him the spot. He looked shocked and told me that 2 kids from his school had gone over that guardrail. One didn't survive. Now, at the time, I had no idea about this. I heard him mention the accident before, but I didn't go to his school, so didn't know any of the details of where it happened. To add to that creepiness, he also told me that his aunt had crashed her motorcycle on this spot in the highway. It was an aneurysm, so can't necessarily be chalked up to something paranormal, but it added to the eeriness. After that day, I always made a note of that guardrail when I passed it. Within a 3-month period, I noticed that the guardrail had been crashed into at least 3 more times. I saw a new crumpled spot, then the rail was replaced. Then 2 more crumpled spots occurred the next week. Overall, I don't know what was going on there. Is it unusual for a guardrail to be hit often on a straight strip of road? Or am I just noticing it because I almost hit that guardrail? Also, can mist travel quickly as if diving in front of the car, or was it something else? There might be a scientific explanation out there, but the whole thing creeps me out. I grew up in central Illinois and moved out on my own at age 19 to attend college. I had a strange experience one night in my apartment that I'm looking for some input on. The area where my college apartment was at was a bit weird, along some farmland at the very edge of the city. It's like someone just took an apartment complex and plopped it down in the middle of a cornfield. Looking out across the land, you could see nothing but field and gray skies with some wind turbines out in the distance. The whole place had this gloomy and lonely, almost forgotten vibe, and that feeling was in my apartment too, mixed with a sense of always being watched. I always felt a sense of dread when squeezing up the narrow stairways to my upstairs apartment. One day, while looking out at the sky, I saw something hovering in the distance. It was too far to make out. It just looked like a large black circle and it didn't move at all. There was no sound like you would expect from a helicopter. I'm not sure what it was, but I checked on it several times and it never moved at all. Just was kinda hanging there in the sky. After about an hour of occasional checks, I noticed that it was gone. I'm not sure if it's at all related to what comes next, but I thought it was worth mentioning since this happened not long after. The story at hand happened one night when my long-distance boyfriend, now husband, was visiting. He knew how much I hated being so far from everyone and living in this gloomy place. So he'd spend the night a couple nights a week between my classes, internship, and waitressing job. We were up late as usual in bed, just having a conversation, and that was when it happened. Out of nowhere at 3 a.m., there was an instant and palpable sense of dread. Not like the usual sense of gloom we always had here, but bone-chilling dread. If you've never experienced this, it might seem like a feeling is hardly worth writing a story on, but I think that humans instinctively know when a predator is there, even if your eyes can't see it. We were mid-conversation, and suddenly everything in the air shifted. It was as if the most evil thing possible was at the foot of our bed, coming closer. Whatever it was invisible to the naked eye, but we both instinctively knew it was there. It had us both paralyzed with fear. Both of us, lying still in the bed, started silently praying, calling on God that whatever this invisible force was to leave us alone. The hairs on the back of our neck stood up. We could sense it there, staring back at us. And suddenly, in a blink of an eye, the street lamp outside my window blew out, and the feeling was gone. It's like whatever it was flew over us and out of the apartment. There was an instant release and a huge wave of relief. Then all of the other street lamps of the complex went out all at once. It was gone as soon as it came. If you were observing us in that moment, you'd just see two people sitting up in bed relaxing. There was nothing that either of us did to tip the other off as to what we were experiencing, but we both turned to each other after the street lamps went out and recalled the same paralyzing fear and sense of doom we had never experienced before. Whatever this was, it was certainly there to cause us harm, and I believe that it was able to manipulate electrical systems due to my light burning out. I have never experienced that type of terror since, or ever had a similar occurrence. I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts, or has experienced the same thing. So my ghost encounter occurred about 1.5 years ago, and it's a bit of a long story. I'm a law enforcement officer, so as such I was tasked with sitting in on an inmate for the night who is in the hospital ICU. The night started much like any other night of hospital duty, but the ICU being as it is, the quietness was quickly replaced with alarms, and nurses and doctors running into an adjacent room to attend to the individual. Soon, the nurses and doctors and ICU returned to normal operation. The alarms and commotion from the adjacent room returned to the quietness that existed prior. I gazed across the hall and noticed that the nursing staff had drawn the blinds and closed the sliding door that leads into that room. I didn't think too much of this and continued on with my duty of overseeing the inmate. The inmate was sedated and nobody else in the room. Shortly after the incident in the adjacent room, I observed the motion-activated sink in my room turn on out of nowhere. I found this quite odd, but chalked it up to a faulty sink. 5 minutes or so went by, and I observed the sink do it again. Then I looked across the hall and noticed hospital staff pushing a bed out of the room with an obvious body being covered by a sheet and blanket. Upon the deceased individual being removed from ICU, I did not experience the motion-activated sink turning on again. This was definitely the oddest thing I've experienced while on hospital duty. In 1995, my late husband and I moved into our home in Seattle. We met at a laboratory we worked at and were not believers in the paranormal. In fact, I'm still an atheist. The house was built in 1926 and had not been renovated at all other than the appliances. I decided we should put an exercise room in the huge basement as our home was too small to put equipment anywhere else. Around that time, I started to notice that things would go missing, and then we would find those things in very weird places. For example, my husband was cooking and I was in the tub. He came in and asked if I had taken the measuring cup. I had gotten into the bath before he started cooking and had not budged. He said he had it right next to him and had turned away to do something, but when he turned back, it was gone. I got out of the tub, put my robe on, and went into the living room next to the kitchen. My eye caught the sight of the fireplace mantel's glass cabinet door, which was ajar, and the measuring cup was on the shelf in the cabinet. I thought my husband was playing some prank on me, but he swore he didn't do it. And around that time, keys and small items would go missing and turn up right where I left them. And then there was the toilet paper. We had cats, one of whom liked to pee on the bath mat, so we religiously kept the door shut. It was a habit, and neither one of us ever left it open. Every few weeks, sometimes months, I would open the door to the bathroom to find that the toilet paper had been unrolled in a chevron pattern all the way across the floor. Even if it somehow unrolled on its own, there was no way it would be in a pattern all across the bathroom. It was then that we became convinced someone was living with us. I made a reservation at La Posada in Santa Fe, so we could go there for a long weekend. It was purportedly haunted, and I wanted to see if anything similar would happen somewhere else. Now, this part still blows me away. I had told a friend about our trip, and one day I came home early from work and flipped on the TV. An episode of Unsolved Mysteries was on, and the hotel I was going to was being featured. The show was at least 10 years old, and it was on a channel I rarely watched. I was shocked at the coincidence. Right then, my friend calls me and says he just turned on his TV, and it was on Unsolved Mysteries and was showing my hotel room. He had also come home early and did not watch this channel. Well, we went on the trip, and all was quiet the first night. But on the second night, something crazy happened. My mom and stepdad came with us, but we were staying in a casita about 10 minutes away. They came to the main building, which had been a grand home built in the mid-1800s. It was purportedly haunted by the wife of the man who built it. We were playing board games and smoking cigars in the game room, which is directly below Julia's room, the supposedly haunted room we were sleeping in. A waitress walked by my dad and spilled a drink on him. My husband said he would go get one of his own shirts since my stepdad's casita was a good distance away. He left us, then came back a minute later, completely excited. He told us we had to go to the room, and I grabbed a staff member to come with us. When we walked in, I knew why he was so excited. The room was just reeking of rose perfume. I mean, it was so strong I had to step out to catch my breath. I asked the staff member if anyone had gone into our room. She said no, they were not allowed to do that unless it was housekeeping. But this was 9 at night. She then told us Julia gets upset when people smoke cigars, and this happens when she smells the smoke. Well, when my husband and I returned from our trip to La Posada, activity in our home ramped up dramatically. Most notably, the unraveled toilet paper prank happened more often. Now, I know what you might be thinking, that my husband was doing this, but he was out of town a lot, and it happened even then. One night, we went out to dinner with some friends on a Sunday evening. We got home about 10 p.m. We were both pretty tired, so decided to go straight to bed as it was a school night. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth, and nothing was amiss. We turned off the lights downstairs and went up the stairs. He was right behind me. I ran to the bed and jumped in over the footboard. At the exact moment I landed, the TV turned on. It was on a channel we had not been on. We had watched SNL the night before. Not only was it on a different channel, but it was playing an old scary movie I remembered watching as a kid, called Don't Look Now. I couldn't believe it was playing, but my husband didn't care about the movie. He wanted to know how the TV turned on. I said I must have landed on the remote and started looking around for it myself. Then he told me not to bother. He pointed to his nightstand, and there it was, a good 15 feet away from him and about 6 feet from me. I knew he didn't turn it on because our TV was a piece of shit. And the on-off button, if it was on the box, was well hidden enough that I had never laid eyes on it. There was a plastic flap at the base of it, and I found out later that you had to reach your fingers underneath it and push a button on the underside of the TV. Anyhow, I thought he had turned on the TV, so I asked him how he turned it on without the remote. But he insisted he didn't do it, and because he didn't have the remote and was also standing about 6 feet away from the TV, I believed him. He was visibly shaken. It had still not sunk in for me. He didn't turn it on, and I didn't turn it on. It was also a different channel. My brain was still thinking it must just be some electrical malfunction and was no big deal. I grabbed the remote and studied it for a few minutes, trying to find a stuck button or some logical explanation, but it looked fine. I used it to turn off the TV with no problem. Being a skeptic too, he didn't go into the must be ghost mode, but decided that someone must be in the house and decided to do a sweep. He had been in the army and had very bad PTSD, so I knew he would feel better. Not being a total moron, I told him I would come with him. On our way out of the bedroom, I tossed the remote on the bed and followed him downstairs. When we walked into the kitchen, all the lights were on, and all the cabinets were open. We definitely did not leave it like that when we went to bed. He was starting to really freak out, and so was I. I now agreed that someone must be in the house, but because of the toilet paper incidences, my mind started to wander if it wasn't something else. We left the kitchen and went into the living room. The light was on in there too, and the chandelier was swinging wildly. I went over to it and reached up to stop it from moving, and felt this kind of static electricity underneath it. That could have been my nerves, but to this day it remains the strangest sensation I have ever had. We decided to continue through the house, and he said he was going to check out the basement. We walked down the hall to the basement door, and I told him to hang on because we had walked past the closed bathroom door, and I wanted to see if someone was in there. I cracked open the door, turned on the light, and saw that the toilet paper was once again unrolled in a chevron pattern across the floor. I shut the door as this was the least of our problems at the moment. My husband then started to go down the basement stairs, when he let out a yelp and quickly did an about-face and came right back up again. He was shaking and said something cold had just gone through his body. He was really upset, and I had never seen him so frightened. We had one more room to go, and because he was freaking out, I told him I'd go in by myself. It was our guest bedroom, and it was just a few feet from the basement door. I reached over to turn the knob, and all of the door hardware fell out. I was left holding a doorknob and was sort of frozen in shock. That was the strangest part for me so far. How could all the hardware have been loosened just enough to fall out when the doorknob was turned? The door opened because no hardware, but nothing in the room itself looked off. So we decided to go back to our bedroom to try to calm down and get some sleep. He was behind me as we went back upstairs, and when we walked back into the bedroom, the TV was on again. I know I turned it off, and I know he had not been in the room since we left it. Whatever had done all the stuff downstairs had been in our room, and I could not find the remote anywhere. I scoured that room but found nothing. My husband thought I might have taken it downstairs, so we decided to go back down to look for it. I guess we could have just unplugged the TV, but I wanted to know where that remote was. He walked out of the room and I was following him. I caught sight of something shiny in the cat litter box. It was a covered box, but the light was hitting something metallic. So I went over and took the cover off. It was the remote control. Yes, my TV remote was buried in the litter box. After everything else that happened that night, this is what put me in a panic. Someone was clearly having fun scaring us, and they were there right now. So, this is one of the many stories I have. I never considered myself psychic or sensitive until a few years ago when I found out stories like mine weren't common with everyone else. Before I can tell the story, I have to give some background. Bear with me. My brother and I have different dads. Unfortunately, his dad passed away a year prior to when the story is set. My mom and his dad did not do well together. He wasn't a bad guy, just troubled and really didn't know how to be a good partner. My mom said that after they separated and she met my dad and got pregnant with me, my brother's dad said, "You finally got the girl you always wanted." This was something she had told him when they were together, that she always wanted a daughter, but obviously they didn't stay together to have another kid. When I was little, he was always really sweet to me. Not in a creepy way, just always interested and asking how I am. My mom said she felt like he always felt drawn to me. Maybe because he regretted the end of his relationship with her, and I, in some way, made him think of what could have been. Who knows? Who knows? Okay, so moving on to the story. A few weeks after my brother's dad died, I had a dream that I was in a hallway with him. He told me he was okay and that he wanted to show me something. He grabbed a door handle, opened the door, and the brightest light came through. But then I woke up. I so wish I could remember what he showed me, or if he did show me anything at all. Okay, now fast forward in time. It was Christmas Eve, 2009, a year later. I was upstairs in my bedroom and I heard music playing. We had a room next to mine with all kinds of toys because I had a lot of nieces and nephews that came over. I assumed the music was coming from there, so I walked into the room to check. It was not coming from that room, and I realized it was coming from the bathroom. The bathroom? Odd, I thought. I went in there and realized the music was coming from a 3-tier box, each tier with a drawer where my mom kept jewelry and other keepsakes. As soon as I touched the box, the music abruptly stopped. I was 21 at this time, and in all the years of living with my parents, I had never heard music come from this box, and she has had it my entire life. I go downstairs and tell my mom the weirdest thing just happened, and I tell her the story. Her face goes completely white. She looks totally freaked out and her eyes well up with tears. She then tells me that that is a jewelry box that her ex-husband, my brother's dad who died, gave her on their wedding day. She said it hasn't played music in 35 years because it broke. We even went upstairs to try to recreate the music and get it to work with no luck. I just smiled and shrugged and said, "Well, I guess he's saying Merry Christmas." I don't know why he chooses me to go through for these messages. We weren't close, but I do think part of it is that he knows I won't brush things off as my brain or something weird. I feel they're from him and he knows I'll share the message. My brother pretty much hasn't been very receptive to the messages, and I don't want to make him feel uncomfortable or upset him. Sorry that this is so long, but wanted to share as it's special to me.